After episode 6 presenting the low point of a series so far, being full of female stereotypes and did not further the plot at all, can episode 7 bring the show back on track? Or did it really jump the shark last week? If you want to hear my take on this, then stay with me for this review video. This week's plot can be summarized quite quickly. In the last episode, at the wedding, Jen met a nice guy by the name of Josh, who seems to be really interested in her and not just the She-Hulk. So in this episode, she starts dating him. However, after the two got intimate, he is ghosting her, which sends Jen into a spiral of self-doubt and sadness. After dwelling 3 days in self-pity, a call from Emil Blonsky's parole officer is getting her a little bit out of that funk. Because he is telling her that Blonsky's inhibitor seems to be malfunctioning or the guy has turned back into the abomination. Afraid to be facing Blonsky in his transformed persona, he is asking Jen if she can join him so he has a Hulk on his side just in case. The malfunction turned out to be a false alarm, so everything is fine and the parole officer is leaving soon. But as Blonsky is living in the meditation facility he is also leading on, two of the guests of his retreat are accidentally demolitioning Jen's car, so she has to stay there and wait for a tow truck. The guests are a mixed group made up of humans and superhuman creatures, all of them looking to find balance in their life, with Blonsky really doing a good job in guiding them. One person among the retreat's guests she even knows from before. It is the guy who led the group who was attacking her in a dark alley a few episodes back. Something that understandably triggered her at first. After being hesitant, Jen finally lets the group help her to deal with her own problems, opening up about her feelings that She-Hulk seems to be loved and respected by everyone, while Jen, who is her real persona, often gets the short end of a stick, which makes her really feel vulnerable and unhappy with that situation. Having someone then fall in love with her real persona and then ghosting her is just piling negatively on it. But the group's advice to just erase his phone number really helps her to clear her head. As she then heads home, she feels much better, though not being completely over it yet. At the end of the episode, we are shown what actually happened 3 days ago, which is actually worse than we thought. Because Josh turned out to be working with this hate group that is hosting the Intelligentsia message board. A group that is either trying to kill her, to copy her abilities by stealing her blood, or both. And a text conversation that Josh has with the head of the organization called Hulk King indicates that he was successful in pertaining the blood sample. Well, it took 7 episodes for the creators of the show to at least allow her to do a little bit of character development when she opens up about her conflicting feelings about being the She-Hulk and being just Jen. It wasn't really much, but it was a start, a step into the right direction, so to speak. And to quickly get it out of the way, the effects are still on the same level as in the previous episodes, so her movements, especially when she is walking around, did not really come across as being really lifelike. But again, this is, I guess, something we have to live with in this show. It was a nice touch though to bring back Blonsky's character to show that he is really running a nice retreat where people come to get better and that he is actually interested in helping them. As I am a big fan of Tim Roth, I hope that his character will resurface in another property soon. I would have expected him actually to be signed on for Thunderbolts, but for that project, at least for now, his name was not mentioned yet. After the previous episodes didn't present us with much, especially when it comes to story development, and was mainly filled with stereotypical events that only proves us one thing, that even if the writing and producing team of a show consists mainly of women, it doesn't mean that they cannot also step into the same traps as male writers. And at the end of the day, even though it is a sad thing to say that they might have broken the glass ceiling when it comes to presenting women with the same stereotypical approach as their male counterparts are doing. For me, this is just proving that there is just good and bad writing and it does not depend on the gender. Though I strongly feel that gender equality should be there. So even though this week's episode is better, I'm still a little bit disappointed in this show overall, because the writing could have been better. And I would have really loved for a female team to succeed there. I hope this is also the consequence that the supervising forces behind Marvel are also concluding, because like I just said, it's not a question of who wrote it, but if it was good or not. Just because this team of female writers were not really rising to the occasion as hoped, does not mean that their gender has something to do with it. But back to this specific episode. For this one, the writing was way better than in the previous episode, which means that the show has not jumped the shark yet. But with only 2 more episodes to go, I'm still not quite sure where this will head ultimately. I guess we have now at least established that the big bad in the background is the Hulk King, who is targeting Jen and either tries to create an army of Hulks on his own, or is trying to kill her because he is not fine with her being in the world whatsoever. I hope that the last 2 episodes are giving enough space to really dig into that, so that it is not just rushed through in the very last episode, or even in the very last minutes of a show. And by now I'm a little bit worried that the guest appearance of Charlie Cox as Daredevil will be quite short, because he still hasn't showed up yet. And again, only 2 episodes left to go. I think it's quite strange that they didn't put him in earlier, because they teased him to be there from the very first trailer that we were shown even before the series started. So not bringing him in earlier than in the last 2 episodes seems to be a little bit of a misstep or an error by the marketing department. But we will see how that will all play out. The scenes in the retreat this week, with the self-help group in particular, turned out to be quite entertaining and funny, even though they are a little bit absurd at times, but not more than recent entries in the MCU like Thor, Love and Thunder did. So it was nothing that felt too much out of place. And it was, like I said, quite entertaining. There was a man-bull creature and a Matador-inspired character with an electric sword, who seemed to be always fighting but still were in some kind of a strange codependent existence. You had the guy from the group that were attacking Jen, as I mentioned before, a guy with a gas mask and a porcupine costume, who was, when lifting the costume, stinking like hell, because it seems he never got out of the costume, even when he was alone. And there was a guy who thinks he was a vampire, something that would turn out quite as a nice in-joke if that was actually a vampire who would show up later on in the Blade movie. But we will see if that was just a nod and a little bit of tease in that direction, or if it actually was someone we might see later on again. So now, before we get to the rating, let me ask you to like and share this video if you enjoyed it so far. And if you are no subscriber yet, maybe consider to change that. By also hitting the notification bell, you will get a heads up for most of my new videos. And now for the rating. As you likely concluded by what I just said in the review part, I liked this episode more than the previous week's episode, which was not a gigantic task because that only received 4 points out of 10 from me. Ironically, after last week's episode was a little bit treacherous by telling us it's a standalone wedding episode when it still had a B story, this one didn't promise anything but turned out to be almost a standalone story, as there was no court case this week and we pretty much didn't see Jen's colleagues and just followed her around for her way out of this depressing situation. With Jen opening up to the group, we also got a little bit of a deeper look into her character, having a little bit of character development here, which previous episodes did not really present that much of. I enjoyed this mixed group of resort guests, even though some of them at first glance seemed to be a little bit over the top, but as I mentioned, not more than in other Marvel properties, so it pretty much fitted in well and made for some funny moments. And the episode overall was quite entertaining from start to finish. So now I must be really careful in scoring it, because like I said before, in the previous episodes I might have been a little bit too generous because it is a Marvel property and I just like Marvel, so maybe that was working very much in the show's favor. However, with episode 6 that was quite a letdown for me. I couldn't excuse that anymore and was giving just 4 out of 10 points, which for a Marvel property might even be unheard of, at least when it comes to my reviews. So I need to really consciously score this episode, and not just because it wasn't as bad as the previous one, just jump up to a higher score again. Because for a second there I thought, hey, that episode was quite great. So I was thinking about giving it 8 out of 10 points. But that would have just meant I already settled to not expect them to exceed the current level that they are hitting, like really digging deep into her character, having some true emotions, more realistic special effects. So I think a score of 7 out of 10 seems to be fair for this episode. I hope the next 2 episodes, as at least one of them will bring us the return of Daredevil, will stay as good or even a little bit better than 7 out of 10 points, but we will see. What do you think? Was that score fair, or should I have reached a little bit higher? Or did I reach too high already again? How would you have rated the episode, and are you happy with the show so far, or what is your general feeling? Let me know in the comments. So much for now, see you next time, and thanks for watching.